Our reading this morning is from James Baldwin. One must say yes to life and embrace it wherever it is found, and it is found in terrible places. For nothing is fixed forever and forever. It is not fixed. The earth is always shifting. The light is always changing. The sea does not cease to grind down rock. Generations do not cease to be born. And we are responsible to them because we are the only witnesses they have. The sea rises, the light fails, lovers embrace each other, and children rely on us. The moment we cease to hold each other, the moment we break faith with one another, the sea engulfs us and the light goes out. Our program this morning is on and with folks from Nonviolent Peaceforce, which is a global nonprofit organization promoting unarmed civilian protection. This organization has many folks around the world who protect civilians in violent conflicts through unarmed strategies. They build peace side by side with local communities and advocate for the wider adoption of these approaches to safeguard human lives and dignity. Peaceforce is and has been in the Ukraine, Syria, South Sudan, Myanmar, and the Philippines, and now, for the first time ever, in the United States of America in Bismarck. A local Philippine leader said, even the visits, even the mere presence of these people, the NP or Nonviolent Peaceforce monitors, helps. We understand ourselves, but now we underestimated ourselves. But now we also rediscovered strength and confidence. Before I introduce our two speakers, I wanted to introduce Pam Costain. Pam is the project director for this effort. She was a co-founder and organizing director for Wellstone Action. She's been on the Minneapolis School Board, and probably something more near to me is that Pam and I grew up in the same neighborhood in Minot, went to the same elementary school and the same church. And so I'm really honored and pleased to introduce Pam Costain. Thiago Wolfer and Martha Hernández have been working in implementation and coordination of programs for the protection of civilians in unarmed conflict within the context of conflict prevention and violence reduction. They have worked in places such as Guatemala, Lanka, South Sudan, and the Philippines. Thiago Wolfer is from Brazil, and Martha Hernández is from Colombia, and they have been here for probably at least 2 months, and we have been very much honored with their thoughtful, respectful, the amount of dignity and thoughtfulness and that they show to those of us who live here, and what they bring to our community has been truly inspiring. So I am very pleased to introduce Thiago and Marta.
Yeah, so initially we had thought about having a presentation about this methodology that we use, this set of tools called Unarmed Civilian Protection. But I think we just decided, we're going to be talking about that, but we just decided just to share some perspectives and talk a little bit about ourselves. I think it's more personal and perhaps more interesting, and especially because some of you attended our training already. But we're going to be discussing a little bit about that, no? And yes, as you said, all those places that we have worked, the organization had worked, yeah, with like civil wars and many really difficult contexts. And then when you sat there for the first time, they're here in the US, and a lot of people, wow, what they're doing here. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that as well. This is a new ground for the organization, you know, I mean, working in different contexts like here. So I will start telling a little bit about myself and why I started doing this work. So I'm from Brazil, I'm from Rio. It's a very nice place, but really high levels of violence, no? And I always asked myself, because Brazil, it's seen as a very peaceful country. You know, our last war was like 300 years ago. We have 10 neighbors and not a single border issue or anything with any of them, you know? So I always wanted to understand this relation, you know, that, I mean, it's so violent, especially in my city, and at the same time, we're seen as a peaceful country, you know? So I always want to understand that. So initially, after the university, I studied international relations. I started to study conflicts more from an academic background, academic perspective, and then, but I felt that I needed to go to the field, you know, I mean, to see how it is, no? And then in 2007, I was hired by NP, and I ended up in Guatemala, and then it's all history, you know?
So thank you very much once again. So, well, yes, I would like to share with you all the motivations and the reasons why I decided to join this organization and to continue with this type of work. So I'm from Colombia. So my country has been in war for the last 50 years. So recently there was a peace agreement signed, which is of course inspiring, and it gives us a lot of hope. However, a peace agreement is just a part of a big puzzle that Colombia has to face, right? So living in a country that has been in war is a great opportunity of reflection. You know, when I see civil society in Colombia, I really think people, civilians in general, have a huge potential to organize themselves and to promote peace and justice, right? So every time I see and I think about Colombia and I see these areas where conflict has been very tough on people, I also find a very strong civil society. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to join MP, because I believe in civil society. I believe that people have the power to organize, to find a way using nonviolence to promote justice, peace, and to protect each other. So that's mainly the reason why I am with this organization. So talking about Nonviolent Peaceforce, well, this is we are part of this international organization, and our mission entails basically three main components. So the first one is to protect civilians who are caught in armed conflict. The second one is building peace together with the communities, and that's really important because what we want to do is to support the local peace initiatives. That give us, that's a great opportunity because supporting the local peace initiatives is what is going to be sustainable, right? And the last component is that we advocate to different organizations, governments, to use these nonviolent strategies to protect civilians, because they work, they are effective in the field, okay?
Yeah, and I think all those strategies, they need to be adapted to each context. So all those countries that you mentioned on, for example, that we are working, the project there looks completely different. In Myanmar and Philippines, for example, we are part of the civilian monitoring mission. So there's an official monitoring mission, and we were invited by the parties in the conflict to basically to be the civilian component doing monitoring, you know? So it's a more technical work, monitoring, reporting incidents, and discussing with the different parties of the conflict. But in other places like South Sudan, it's a lot of grassroots work, working a lot of communities with community-based organizations, you know. So it's very difficult to put what Martha was saying and what unarmed civilian protection entails as a consolidated process. No, I think it's something that it's still evolving, and part of our work here, it's also a part of that. No, and of course, I think we're going to be discussing a little bit about what we're doing here in the end. But what we wanted to tell you is about the three principles that the organization stands for. You know? So the first one is nonviolence. Second one is no partisanship, which is different from neutrality. We are not neutral when you're talking about human rights, international humanitarian law, violence, torture, but we don't take any part in the conflict. No, I mean, so that's why we prefer to use the term non-partisanship. And finally, the primacy of local actors, where Martha was saying how the work needs to be sustainable, and so that's why the community needs to be at the center of the decision making. You know, and so we're just going to share some interesting stories, and I want to hear your perspective on that. No, so the first one that we're going to share is about the importance and the primacy of local actors. So there was this organization in South Sudan. They do water and sanitation. No? So in the humanitarian field as a whole, you have different clusters. No? So one of them is water and sanitation. Ours is protection work, but you have nutrition, you have shelter, you have education, you have food. So you have around like maybe 10 or 11 clusters. Sorry, one of them is water and sanitation. So this organization, they went to this village in the middle of South Sudan, and they realized, you know, I mean, they just talked to one of the chiefs, and they realized that the well was really, really far. You know, okay, I mean, when there's a well and people needs to walk really far, you have some security concerns, no? So without talking to a lot of people, they just started to dig a well closer to the community, you know, like 3 minutes walking, and then. So they did a really nice job, you know, this really, really nice well, everything automatic, you know, shiny new. And then after 3 weeks, they went back and they realized that no one was using this well. Everyone was still going to the well that was really, really far. And then they decided finally to have a focus group discussion with the women from the village. And then when they sat with us, after like half an hour, one of them finally shared, look, the problem is that we like to go to that well because it's our time to be together, you know, I mean, to gossip and to talk about the man. If you dig a well just 3 minutes from here, we don't have time for ourselves. We need to keep doing our house duties, you know. So that's why it's so important. Talk to people, you know, hear what they're saying.
That's a good story. So the other principle is about nonviolence, right? So again, I'm just going to share a situation that I think illustrates why and how important is still nonviolence in our days. And it's a story of Colombia, right? So in Colombia, there are communities that are being affected by war for a long time. And there are many, but I don't know what's the number, but I'm sure there are plenty of them in rural and urban areas. So one of these communities, they got tired of being always targeted by the different parties of the conflict. So sometimes it was the government, sometimes it was the guerrilla group, sometimes it was the paramilitary group. So everybody was just targeting them. So they got really, really tired. So these community leaders, they came together and decided, look, we don't want to be part of this war anymore. So we are civilians, okay? So they decided to create what is called a peace community. So this group of leaders and the community as a whole decided that their territory was going to be out of the confrontation of the different armed groups. So they decided that this community was not going to be involved anymore with any of the armed groups. So what they did, they decided to draft around 10 rules, like this is our community, this is a peace community, so we are going to resist to the conflict in nonviolent ways. So we are not going to allow anyone with guns in our community. We are not going to support any of the parties. We are civilians. So they use all these nonviolent strategies to resist the conflict and to say, look, we don't have any party in the conflict. So that was the first peace initiative was created in 97, and up to now there are many more in the country. So it's been very hard for these communities to resist because, of course, when you are in the middle of an armed conflict and you decide clearly and you speak out and say to the armed actors that you are not going to be part of that, it's very hard, right? Because they have been constantly targeted. But they got a lot of international visibility, and visibility is also a way of promoting protection. So these communities have this set of rules, and one of their main principles is nonviolence. So up to now, these communities are still there. They are still working for their own communities, but I want to reinforce is that nonviolence is still pertinent, is still necessary is an alternative to face and confront those who are part of an armed conflict. And that happens in Colombia. And I think that's a clear example on how nonviolence is relevant today, okay?
So finally, no partisanship. So basically, that's the strategy the organization uses in order to have an open channel with all the parties involved in the conflict. No, it's really important for us to have a dialogue with all the parties involved. Of course, it's really challenging sometimes, but we always try to do that. No, I mean, it doesn't mean, because we know that the community, they're just embroiled in the conflict, so of course people take sides, but it's just a strategy for the organization. Also, a very interesting story that happened in Sri Lanka, I wasn't there, but I've heard from my colleagues, was when we were coming back from a field visit, going back to our office, there was a wounded soldier in the middle of the highway, you know? And so, by principle, no one with uniforms or weapons can get inside our cars, no, because of the nonviolence and the no weapons policy. So there was a lot of discussion because between the team, because if we put the soldier in our car and we take him to the hospital, the community could perceive us as taking the side of the government in this case, no? And that could jeopardize our mission there and the years of confidence building that we had with the community. You know, the acceptance that we gained from the community could be compromised. But at the same time, is a human life. No, I mean, what can you do in this kind of situation? So there was a lot of debate, you know, but international humanitarian law says that a wounded soldier is not a soldier anymore, is a civilian, you know. So of course, I mean, we have the obligation, you know, I mean, to save a life. So of course, it took some time for us to talk to all the leadership of the community, to all the chiefs and all the people, for them to understand why we are doing that we are not taking sides, but we cannot just leave someone by the side of the road dying, even if it's a soldier or whatever. And but it's just to highlight some of the challenges that you have sometimes when you're working in a conflict zone. No, we are not an advocacy organization. We don't do like those called naming and shaming reports as Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International. When we came to know about human rights violations, something like that, we try to work with the parties in order to avoid that in the future, no? Instead of like blaming and. Okay.
Right. Another important thing to mention and to share with you all, something that we've seen in our work in different parts of the world, is the role that religious leaders play in areas where conflict is happening. And I'm going to talk about this in Sri Lanka in particular. So for us, well, we were working a lot with individuals affected by armed conflict, basically, and that entails people whose relatives have been kidnapped, disappeared, well, many really bad things happening there. So we were working with the Jesuits there, and they were this moral authority in the community who were able to take a stand and to protect those that really were in conflict, were affected by conflict, right? So this community of Jesuits, they were able to take legal action. They were able to open vocational training centers for minors who have been taken and then release or run away from armed groups and provide some sort of psychosocial support, some skills, learning some sort of job. So they were the people in the community who were able to really stand, right? Because nobody targeted them. So I really think, and we share this, is that these religious leaders in communities affected by conflict, they really play a crucial role. And the opportunity they have is big. And it's not just about the individual, the religious leader, but it's also about the congregation, right? So I think that's still very relevant today.
Yeah, so finally, that's why we want to make a special mention to Karen, and we really honor your work, your role and your importance in the community, and also how this congregation here, it's important to keep the community together during some challenging times, no? So in the beginning, as we said, so this is a new ground for the organization. Basically, what we're doing here, we're just working with the community to try to open a safe space for dialogue. Try to be a very inclusive and representative of the community. And basically, what came out of the training is the importance of having a support group of some people who don't feel safe or they don't feel comfortable sometimes when maybe coming to Bismarck or Mandan due to the issue related to what is going on at Standing Rock, no? So I think basically we are working together with the community to try to promote this space, no, and to foment this support group. And we're really thankful for all of you and your contribution to that.
Yeah, just to finalize, we really want to thank this congregation, Karen, the different leaders, because we really felt that we've been welcomed to this place, not just as individuals, but also as part of this organization. So thank you, everybody.
My name is Pam again. I'm with NP, and because I'm not here consistently the way Martha and Thiago are, I just wanted to take this opportunity to also express my personal gratitude to this congregation, but to this community. I think that, and I'm just punctuating a point that they made, there are so many assets here for peace building, for going forward in this community in a way that is not just going back to the way it was in the past, but going forward with a renewed sense of inclusion and justice and that kind of thing. So I am so impressed with Bismarck, Mandan, the indigenous people at Standing Rock and throughout the state of North Dakota. And I want to encourage you to not let this moment go by, but to use this moment to really create, a new North Dakota.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our closing words are from Rebecca Edmiston Lang. Mindful of our highest aspirations, bound by common thoughts and purpose, and yet beginning with ourselves as we are, let us take one more step together in our unending quest for dignity, justice, and love.